Thursday edition of the Bold Republic Radio Show. We head all the way down to Cheyenne, Wyoming. We're hanging on right now. Is Boyd Wiggum from Wyoming Liberty Group. How have you been with your bad self, Boyd?
Well, we're doing well down here. We're trying to survive Cheyenne Frontier Days.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about Cheyenne Frontier Days. You know what? It's too late now. You missed it. But every year in Buffalo, they have a Longmire Days with the cast from the television show and the people who are playing, from the novel series that's supposed to take place up in that area. That's just a good time. That's something you ought to attend some year. But don't live in an area where they have things like Frontier Days.
Well, it is certainly a week-long party.
Oh, yeah. As long as you don't live too close to the action and the traffic, you ought to do just fine. So Boyd is on today, in part because we call them city administrators here in this part of the country. I'm from the South, so they were city managers. But then they also have mayors. So this is for those folks out there who are taking a look at your own city hall and you're kind of scratching your head and wondering, how do you fix this? And Boyd, first question right off the top of my head is, I've always wondered why we would need a city administrator or city manager if we already have a mayor. Isn't that supposed to be his job, the mayor's job?
Yes, that is supposed to be the mayor's job.
Okay.
To play devil's advocate here, and some might argue that by my lawyerly profession, I'm inherently a devil's advocate. But the argument.
No, actually, you got that wrong.
The city administrator,
wait, Boyd, you got that wrong. You're a lawyer, therefore you're the devil. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, now you start splitting.
It's a whole another line of jokes there. But okay, let's get back to what you were saying.
Yes. The argument for this is that a city like Cheyenne can't elect a mayor that is competent to run the city. The arguments for this are based on the notion that the budget is so big that you have to have a professional that you can go find and hire to run, to operate the city on a day-to-day basis. In addition, there's complaints down here that if you have a politician like a mayor who's faces the ballot box every 4 years, that decisions, management decisions, are made with an eye toward the next election rather than what's good for the city, as opposed to swaying with the political winds.
Right.
And finally, I think part of what's driving this right now is that under the strong mayor form of government, it's really difficult to make the city change how it operates on a year-to-year basis, and the local business community is kind of who's driving this. I came up with a draft a resolution that the city council is considering. And is pushing toward the city administrator.
So they're actually, are you saying that they're actually in Cheyenne considering getting rid of the mayor position in favor of hiring somebody to do the job?
Not to put too fine a point on it, but not really. And
Okay.
That's the distinction between the city administrator, that would be a position that's created by Cheyenne in its charter as a home rule city, versus the city manager form of government that the Wyoming law provides for, and that you see in Casper, for example, or I believe Gillette has you call it a city administrator.
Yes, we do.
But like Casper, they just elect city councilman, and then they hire a city administrator and appoint one of their number to cut ribbons, such as a mayor.
Right.
Here in Cheyenne, we would still elect a mayor at large that would still cut ribbons and would appoint people to, like the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission, that kind of thing, but would not have direct reporting authority over, like, the Public Works Department, the Sanitation, the Planning Department, streets and alleys, those kinds of just basic city functions, operations.
Oh, how much does your mayor get paid in Cheyenne?
I would have to look. It's a healthy sum.
Yeah.
I have not looked at that, but there's an expectation that that salary would be cut, because the mayor would still be elected and would still serve on the
Right. You see, that's what I was thinking. If you're going to turn the job over, most of these jobs over, because they're management jobs, and you know, boy, there are people who actually do go to college to learn how to become the city administrators, and then they just apply for jobs in cities all over America, and they tend to move around quite a bit too. They unless they like small towns, they try to move up to bigger cities where the higher salaries are. But that's actually a position where you can get a degree in. And so it might bring up the question, well, your mayor doesn't have a degree in how to run a city, but your city administrator does. Maybe he's more qualified for the job. Cut the salary of the mayor, pay the guy who can actually do the job because he was trained to.
And that's what the local newspaper and the local business community and the advocates for this move are saying is, hey, we can go find ourselves somebody who's specifically educated and trained and has experience in this job description, and this person will even be a little bit buffered from the people and from the electorate, so we can concentrate on running the city.
Right. Now, that brings up the question. So if somebody is a city administrator that's really running the city, do you think that he's subject to more political pressure or less?
I think that the political pressure is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's more or less, but I think it's inherently different.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's going on here is there's some folks that think that the mayor has kind of been captured by the people who report to him, his advisors, the people he works with on a daily basis, and a city administrator, that could happen. In addition, the city administrator would be answerable to the city council for his or her job,
right,
whether to remain in the office or not. And that's a different type of political pressure than if the administrator or the mayor is answerable directly to the general populace,
right,
independently of the city council.
But in effect, what he's supposed to do, though, is he's got his marching orders from the city council, and so he's just supposed to make it happen. It doesn't sound like he is a policymaker. He has to make decisions in how to get things done, but he doesn't make policy.
True. That would kind of be the notion, but in reality, the administrator would be in charge of directing people to prepare reports to the city council that would inform policy, the data collection, and all of these daily procedures. You would, even though they're carried out, that I think the city administrator would in fact help form policy through the types of things that the administrator brought forward to the council.
Well, see, it sounds to me like all of this is still too complicated. I'm not trying to get you off the subject here, but let's take a look at it for a minute. We have supposedly, we know it doesn't really work this way, but supposedly on the state level, the lawmakers show up once a year for a month or so, and then they leave and they're done. And so I take a look at a city council that's having regular meetings throughout the month, and I think, well, to run an entire state, I mean, even Texas meets every other year. To run an entire state, if the lawmakers only have to show up once a year or every other year, why do you need a city council that shows up several times a week?
Yeah, well, and as I watch the city council meetings, there's a host of things that appear on the docket that I kind of question whether or not they really should come before a policy-making body. Things like, especially with land development, as you and frequent listeners may know, my interest is in property rights and particularly in the rights of people who want to use their property for economic gain. And there's a number of things that occupy the city council's time: plats, zoning, zone changes, subdivisions of any type and manner, and those all come before the city council. And right now, in order to build a building or to sell off a piece of property, you have to go get permission from the city council. and that would be the type of thing that
No, wait.
council meets frequently because they're dealing with stuff that I'm not convinced that they need to deal with.
I would have to go to the city council if I wanted to sell a building.
Well, probably if the building was not on a separate lot of on its own. I think of maybe a shopping center. Somebody builds 3 or 4 buildings and has them all in one big unit and decides to sell one to somebody. You'd have to go through the subdivision process to create a separate legal lot that building was sitting on, and then you could sell that to whoever wants to buy it. And it would be in their best interest, the buyer's best interest, to have that lot. But the decision of whether or not you can create that lot comes before the city council, as opposed to, okay, here's what I have to do, the various filings and publication, whatever.
So getting back to the city administrator and mayor, or an either-or thing, if that's what some cities want to do. Bringing it back to that, it looks to me like the whole process in itself is just too complicated, which would be one of the reasons that they sit down and scratch their heads and say, gee, how should we organize this? We have an administrator, a mayor, or both? I think they need to probably back up and take a look at how complicated their system is to begin with.
That would be one thing to do. I would argue that this really is question of principle, that we can look back in our country's history and find that elections matter. One of the bedrock principles of our republic is that the voters decide who governs over them, both at the legislative level. I mean, all the colonies had their own elected legislatures or assemblies, but the people that ran the machinery of government on a day-to-day basis were, appointed bureaucrats, people who had demonstrated administrative expertise in other parts of the British Empire and now were stationed in New York or Williamsburg or Philadelphia, and so or Boston or something like that. So we've kind of answered that question once over the course of our history, whether or not a professional government administrator is preferable, or if we want to stand on the basic principles that people bled and died for in the 18th century, that ultimately the right answer is for the voters to select and elect the person that's going to run in the government, and consequently also the voters have the ability to remove that person from office at the next election without having to get support from the legislative body or what have you.
A mayor, one or the other. In today's political climate, who do you think is easier for the people to fire?
Well, I think if you have enough people that want to fire the mayor, if most people want to fire the mayor, it's really simple. Every 4 years, there's an election, and people can vote for someone else. And that's a pretty clear-cut way to fire a mayor. And some of the beauty behind that is built into that process. You know who the replacement is. If you have a city manager or city administrator, you've got to convince the city council to get on board with firing this person. Right. Now, you can fire somebody without having to wait till the next election.
Well, and based on what you're saying, think of it this way: if the people were not satisfied with their city administrator, and so convinced the city council to get rid of them, well, it's now up to the city council to pick the next one, not the people.
Correct.
Okay.
And you've got two things going on here. What happens if you were generally dissatisfied with how the city is operating, but the city council is satisfied? And so you've got a two-step process there. To fire the administrator, you have to replace enough members of the council to get a majority of people who would fire the administrator. And then you have the dismissal. So there could be an intervening election. You need to think about things like severance pay. The cost of how many former administrators do you want to pay if you get a new appointee that isn't serving your needs as a city, versus if you lose an election, there's no guarantee guarantee a continued salary if you lose an election. Also, you've got the intervening period after you fire one administrator of just trying to find a replacement. You're going to have somebody that's temporarily in there, and find a replacement, and the debate about finding somebody that has the training to do the administrative job sounds all well, fine, and good when you talk about the expertise of running a city. But as we all know, every community is different, and you've got the notion that if you bring somebody else new in, they've still got a learning curve. They've got to learn about the
They're
community.
in a whole new area, sometimes a whole new culture. According to the crack research staff, that would be DJ. She let us know that in 2011, the mayor of Cheyenne made $96,000. So she's still trying to look up the current salary. And she writes, don't forget, for every mayor or administrator, there's a staff assistant, at least one, and the beanies such as vehicles, meals, pension, and on, which is some of what you were just going through right there. So in your opinion, then, it sounds to me like you're saying a mayor is a better way to go.
Well, I believe so. Now, it's easier to... You can fire an administrator on a shorter time frame. You don't have to wait for an election, and that is a part of the appeal to some people. That if you need to make a change, you don't have to wait till the next election. But when you do make the change, take a look at the city of Casper's recent experiences since Tom Forsland left. They've gone through a number of city managers, and those are kind of rough breakups.
Yeah.
And there's consequences, and it's kind of a turbulent process. Whereas, we've got the chaos of an election with a mayor.
Well, let's not forget, city administrators tend to have a contract that they come with. Getting out of those contracts can be difficult. In fact, you're probably going to pay for 2 administrators just to get rid of the one.
Probably.
Yeah.
Most likely, unless you can fire somebody for cause. But
Well, okay, now here's where you get to call me stupid and crazy. Write those words down and get ready to use them. Here's my idea, Boyd, that I've had for a while. I would love to see a city council for anywhere, I don't care where, that shows up twice a year, 2 weeks in the wintertime, 2 weeks in the summertime. Because there tends to be, especially if you live in a northern climate, some things that need to be done in the wintertime and some different problems that occur in the summertime just based on weather alone, but also tourism and all sorts of other problems there. So let them meet, let them have their meetings, and go ahead and decide how the cities, what their policies are, pass ordinances, things like that. Then they can go home. The only time you call them back, the mayor can call them back, is if he really needs the council on a decision. Other than that, I would leave the mayor in charge, and really all he should be doing is keep the street lights on, fill the potholes, make sure the bills are paid and the parks are, mowed and the streets are plowed, things like that. And that would mean you'd have to seriously reduce the size of city government, which I'm all for. Now, would that work, or am I stupid and crazy?
That's an intriguing idea.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be a lot less hassle if we did it that way. And basically, you're hiring as a mayor a guy just to oversee and take care of the business of the city. So he's not allowed to make any policy. Now, like an executive order for the president, if he needs to make a decision fast, he can. But that's when you bring the city council back in to see if they like the decision they made or not.
Well, and with the city council, there should be minimal travel required.
Oh, yeah.
People can be
up the block, a phone call away.
Yes.
Yeah, simple as that.
And,
okay.
What you would lose is some of the notion that the city council is the form of government closest to the people, and so you've got that. It becomes a little bit more removed, and
right.
But just in general, as a tool to perhaps reduce the size of government, that would be a wonderful idea.
I may not be as stupid as crazy, and I am. Boyd, where do people find your work?
Well, they can visit www.wyliberty.org, or we also have Facebook and Twitter, and look for Wyoming Liberty Group.
Thank you, Boyd, for coming on. Appreciate it. Good to talk to you again.
Thank you, sir.